Jalen Waddle signs a 3-year, $85 million contract. He is a good player. He was drafted the year before George Pickens.
Mm-hmm.
If George Pickens were to have a fabulous season this year, I think that's kind of what you're looking at for him.
Mm-hmm.
3 years, $85 million. Can you see Pickens getting that kind of money here in Pittsburgh?
No.
Me neither.
No.
I think their shopping around for a number 1 or number 2 wide receiver has less to do with Van Jefferson and Quez Watkins and any of these veteran 4 or 5 wide receiver types, and more to do with George Pickens and their lack of faith in him as a bona fide, proven stud number 1 wide receiver.
Well, I mean, he's never going to get that here because I don't think he's going to get the targets that some of these guys get, like an Ayuk. I mean, the offense is, they're going to obviously pass the ball, but they're not going to be constructed to, be an explosive in the air type offense that can get you that money like Miami is or like San Francisco is. And also, you want to have an established receiver. You want to be willing to pay that money to an established receiver, not just 1 year of a sample size of, hey, you balled out, we're going to pay you now. Now, you want to see it over a couple years, and that's how the Steelers operate. And George isn't going to have those opportunities. So you pay a guy that's established, or you trade and pay a guy that's established. That's more in the Steelers' realm, in my opinion, than anything.
I am with you, man. And Kaboli was on with us yesterday, and we asked him about whether or not they were going to go after a Brandon Ayuk or any of those guys that we've thrown their names out there for seemingly months now. And he said, yeah, they'd have to pay him and George Pickens. No, if I'm George Pickens and they brought in an Ayuk, I might be happy that some of the coverage is going to lean the other way. But I wouldn't be happy about my long-term prospects in Pittsburgh because I don't think you're going to pay 2 guys $30 million. And I personally would much rather pay a Brandon Ayuk $30 million a season than a George Pickens. And I'm okay with having one of those guys on my roster anyhow, but I'm not a huge Pickens fan. I'm a fan of the talent. I don't think he's all that dissimilar to O'Neal Cruz, where like O'Neal Cruz has the talent and you're just waiting and he hits the ball hard, just like George Pickens every now and again will make a one-handed catch or get the toe drag and you'll think, oh my God, this guy could be one of the best receivers in football. And with a good quarterback last year, or at least good quarterback play, he was much better, no doubt. But do I think he can do it for 17 games? Consistently, day in, day out? At this point, my answer to that is absolutely not.
No, I can see him in the realm of Gabe Davis, like what Gabe Davis got with the Jaguars, a 3-year, $39 million deal. If he has a great year, I'm trying to look up Gabe Davis' stats right now, and I feel like that would be in the realm of George Pickens, what Gabe Davis did last year. But I can
another
see
guy that's
him
been an inconsistent dude,
very inconsistent, and that's basically to me the range that George Pickens would be in if he has a pretty decent year this year. What did Gabe Davis do?
I mean, I think he'd be above that because I look at Jalen Waddle's numbers, right? And Waddle's had 3 1,000-yard seasons. His best year was 2022 with nearly 1,400 yards and 8 touchdowns. George Pickens in 2 years, 800 his first year as a rookie and 4 tutties. And then last year he had over 1,000 yards, 1,140 and 5 touchdowns. So if he were to have another 1,000-yard season this year, and right now by default you feel like he probably will, I think he is barking up that Jalen Waddle tree.
Yeah, a little bit, actually, now looking at the stats of Gabe Davis.
But I do view him as inconsistent like Gabe. Right.
Yeah.
Like, if they trade for Brandon Ayuk, that will really benefit the 2024 Pittsburgh Steelers, and they will be a much better football team for it. But it is not a good thing, I don't think, for George Pickens. There's no way they're going to pay both guys $30 million.
No.
And you're not going to acquire Brandon Ayuk if you don't pay him $30 million.
I think if you get Ayuk, you're willing to say goodbye to George Pickens and probably draft another young wide receiver to pair with Ayuk, Roman Wilson, too.
Yeah.
You go that route. That's probably what would happen. If they do trade, whoever they trade for is going to be the number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah, man, that's really
not
well
a number
said
2
by you. They're
going to be the number 1.
I am, my friend, picking up what you were putting down. We looked at the Roman Wilson drafting, and we say, this guy, he's going to be their slot receiver, and maybe he could play his way into the number 2 role. But if you go out and you get another guy that's either your 1 or your 2, and again, we'll use Brandon Ayuk for this, They might have been thinking Roman Wilson will replace George Pickens.
Yes.
They're not similar players, but he's a receiver, and if he plays well this year, that would make George Pickens expendable.
Yes.
Man.
Then you go in the draft because, then you would have another need, but you need D-line help, but you can still get another second or third round receiver because you hit on Roman Wilson.
And they know what they've been doing there, man.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
And you think about this, too. Deontay Johnson is a good football player.
Uh-huh.
He does some weird stuff like run backwards, and he'll have drops in inopportune times, and he quit on plays, and at one particular point didn't even start on a play. But he's a good football player. They shipped his ass out of town. And if George Pickens is a malcontent in any way, shape, or form this year, I don't feel like this organization, the way it's run right now, has a lot of patience for that.
Nope.
It's still, to me, the best case scenario is getting a Brandon Ayuk, and it's seeming more and more likely by the day, by the way. Not only did the 49ers hand out $15-ish million to Juwan Jennings, but immediately after that, I missed this, or it might have happened after our show yesterday, Dorin. Brandon Ayuk on Instagram, after the Jennings contract became public, you saw this, he tweeted out, "I'm way too hungry to be spitting my food up like that." Splitting my food. Forgot the L in there. So he's not happy about the circumstances.
Right. This is what we talked about yesterday. Would you be happy if you just saw them draft a first-round receiver and then pay somebody that is behind you, way behind you, in the target share?
Right, and you've already got Deebo Samuel there.
And Christian McCaffrey, who's a receiver.
A lot of mouths to feed.
Kittle.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking like you're a bottom feeder right now.
In some games, you're the guy, and in a lot of other games, you're not the guy. Because if any team in football changes their stripes based on their opponent, it's that team. So Brandon Ayuk, while he might one week be the guy who's getting 15 targets, there's going to be other weeks where he's third or fourth on the totem pole there.
And they feel that they would be comfortable without having Ayuk on the roster and won't miss a beat. And I think that if you poll the normal NFL watching fan that knows the 49ers, I think everybody would say the same thing, which is crazy. That if Ayuk was not on this roster this year, they still would be fine.
Because of the scheme.
Because
the other weapons.
Mm-hmm. And they feel that way too, I believe. And Ayuk feels that way. So it's like he's going to be like, okay, it's time for me to move on.